Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be looking at something I've only ever spent a little bit of time looking at on the channel, and I felt like doing it over again for a little bit. Sorry about there not being a video last week. I had 4 teeth out, and so I apologise if my speech isn't quite as great as it was just yet. Eventually I'll figure it out, I swear. All that aside, today I want to look at what the Legend of Zelda series could do after Breath of the Wild sequel, because there is so much that could happen. I mean, there are still some different directions for the series to go. There are old directions that could be revisited. Perhaps they even stick with the all new stuff that we've just been given. Heck, they could even give us the complete same as we were given this time. There's even a very small chance they just decide to keep rolling with the hero of Wilds as the hero of the series. Now, I am doubtful of that last one, but it would be a cool idea. Anyway, it's time to get the thoughts on the page, and if you end up enjoying the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to see more weekly Zelda content from me. One final thing, thank you all so much for 1,800 subscribers. Every single one of you mean the world to me, and I hope you will continue to enjoy. Now, let's get into it. We have seen the Legend of Zelda series take over many forms over the years. Some examples of this are the tried and true progression based games, the open world format of Breath of the Wild, and even a Wild West shooter that uses the Wii pointer. A weird gimmick, but a fun little game at least. Of course, the latest change, and the biggest for the 3D set of games, was the insane amount of open exploration that you were allowed in Breath of the Wild. I mean, 1 second you could be staring up at Death Mountain, and then the next 10 minutes, you're at the top of the mountain staring down at the ant-looking Goron city. It was insane the amount of things that you could do simply at a whim in Breath of the Wild. One of my biggest whoa moments of playing a video game came right near the start of Breath of the Wild, in fact. Initially, after not digging into many trailers of the game, I was given a paraglider and I was almost certain I would be railroaded into going to a certain place, and sure, if I wanted to go straight to Impa, then I could have done that, but no. Instead, the dev team tried to create a certain kind of magic, and that landed. Well, I mean, for me it did anyway. Really, this was the first really big and instant change that's been brought onto the 3D series, like, ever. With the exception of longer cutscenes and more story bits, the 3D games were extremely similar before this. Obviously they had their own simple themes, but I hardly count that as them having their own real identities, if you know what I mean. But that's completely fine. If people were annoyed that the games felt the same but with different themes, then sequels to any game would be unnecessary. However, Breath of the Wild is a very different beast in this department. In the past, we've had a very few occurrences where the next game has followed on from the past hero's journey. While 2 games using the same link one after the other definitely might not signify any big changes, it definitely at least is worth looking at. So how likely do I think that it is that we keep following this Link's journey even after the next game, making a trilogy of games that exclude Age of Calamity? Honestly, I think that it's a great idea, and the concept in general just sounds amazing. A giant interconnected story that runs through a ton of games, sequel upon sequel. But when looking down at the broader audience of these things, it all becomes a little bit murky. For example, imagine someone who hasn't played a Zelda game before, much less a game set post Breath of the Wild, and they pick up the game that comes after the sequel to Breath of the Wild. It's the start of a real trilogy of these games, and they start off with the 3rd one. And previous story bits are alluded to, or are actually part of the story. Suddenly, the player has no clue what's going on and might even put the game down for risk of them losing so much of the story in older games that it won't even be fun to play through. That sort of thing could just deter people. Just the fact that it's a trilogy may make a lot of people want to start over at the start. It's just a lot of messy work in my opinion. Some franchises do it well, but I can't imagine Zelda doing it particularly amazingly, especially after years of doing it a different way. But this does beg the question of what gameplay bits they could do differently after these games. Well, we know that the open format does indeed work perfectly for 3D Zelda games and was received pretty darn well by everyone, much like it did for the original game on the NES. So they could easily go ahead and keep trucking on with truly open world games, but I don't know how long it'll be before the worlds get stale. Without, adding crazy environments or something like that, there's not much you can do there. Especially if they want to keep up the trend of the games of old where they keep very similar locales in the game, your Zora's Domains, your Gerudo Deserts, Death Mountains and other bits. So I personally think that they'll do a real open world Zelda every now and then, but maybe fill the other gaps with old linear Zeldas to really bring in those old fans tenfold. Now when it comes to whole new ideas that the Zelda team could implement to future games, there really aren't many that spring to mind pretty much instantly. Of course, they could follow along the trend of other successful open world games, and we already know they're doing this in the next installment, since it's been confirmed that they're looking for inspiration through other games such as Red Dead Redemption 2. Which some happen to think is the single best open world game ever made, and I'll definitely talk about it a bit more at some point. And you know what, even I believe that if some of the best bits from Red Dead 2 were taken into Breath of the Wild sequel, then it has a pretty big chance of becoming one of the single best open world games of all time, and most likely my favourite open world game ever. Combining my two favourite open world games ever would make my favourite ever, without a doubt. Who would have guessed? Now, the other thing to do with the rest of the video gaming market would just be what everyone else is doing at the moment, and I can't see us getting another Zelda FPS anytime soon, or a Zelda Battle Royale. We did get a Final Fantasy mobile Battle Royale though, so who knows I guess. My personal hope on this front is that they decide to keep revolutionising the open world formula, because Breath of the Wild's open world, whilst very fun, had a lot of improvements to bestow upon it, and I really want to see that potential realised in the future. My favourite series perfecting my favourite genre of video games would be a dream come true, to say the least. And honestly, the best way for Zelda to revel in the open format would be to implement certain bits of the old more linear format too, in my opinion. I mean, that would be the way to perfect it for me. Add in the things that the Zelda team know how to develop, and at the same time also use something they're starting to understand, and I really do think they'll have a barrel of success. I also think it will spell an amazing few games in the series, and the prospect of all of these different directions after Breath of the Wild 2 truly does make me hyped. There are very few series that can get you hyped up for the game after the next without any sort of talk on the game already, and if you're into Zelda, there's no doubt you've at least had this thought in the past. And I think today we've covered the last of my thoughts on it. Well, that is until the sequel comes out anyway. Now, how would you like the Zelda series to continue after Breath of the Wild sequel? Perhaps you think a break from 3D games is in order to create the next stunning open world game, and during that time we could get maybe a 2D game, or maybe you'd like some of the ideas portrayed here today. Whatever your thoughts are, let me know in the comments and I'll get around to hearting and responding to every single comment. Now thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, then please do support me by leaving a like, rating and subscribing. The people you can see on screen right now are my Patreon supporters, and they are just perfect people. Now look at them. Sumji and Jared Whedon are especially amazing for being my top main patrons. Just look at the Triforce coloured names and Triforce font. Thank you so much for the support, guys. If you'd like to join them, then you can do for as little as £1 or $1.50 a month. The link to my Patreon is in the description, and along with that link is the link to the rest of my media platforms, so please do follow me on them if you'd like to keep in touch with me. Again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for bearing with me while my mouth slowly heals, and thank you so much for understanding about no video last week and a slightly smaller scale video this week. But until next week, please do stay safe.